Welcome to another PL Together Lounge Talk. I'm Adam Geller, founder and CEO of Edthena, the video powered professional learning company. Today, we're talking with Jim Knight, the author of multiple books, but the most recent of which is The Definitive Guide to Instructional Coaching, The 7 Factors for Success. Jim, thanks so much for joining us.
It's great to be here.
So we've been talking about data and how video can be a source of data for coaches about their coaching conversations. But I'm curious to talk about another type of data and how video can be a powerful tool for gathering that data, and that is student engagement data. So in your book, you kind of remind everyone that there are multiple types of engagement data that can be captured. There's behavioral data, cognitive data, and emotional data. So cognitive and emotional, those are inside the student's head, the techniques to get it out of their head. But behavioral data, that can be observed via video. It can be observed at arm's length. So I'm curious, table stakes, should folks be thinking, yeah, I'm going to capture behavioral data using video?
Yeah, I've got a couple of thoughts, but great question. The first thing is there are those who will say, look, I really don't care about engagement, although I care about student learning. And so I have a few thoughts in response to that. Of course, you're going to do what you're going to do where you are. So maybe that's the way people want to go. But the first thing I'd say is that the reason why people drop out of school is usually engagement. If they don't feel a connection with the school, if they don't feel engaged, they don't feel safe. What I call emotional engagement is critical, but part of emotional engagement is behavioral engagement. So to me, engagement is an equity issue. If our schools are for all students, we need to create places where kids feel like they belong, where they have a connection. And that's why the first thing about engagement. The second thing is, though, I can't understand the book unless I read the book. So to me, it's kind of a no-brainer that you have to be engaged to learn. If I'm not listening, I'm not getting anything out of the activity. So I need to be looking at, if I want achievement, I need to have kids who are actually listening and engaged in the classroom. So there's those two reasons why I think engagement is really critical. It's an equity issue, and it's also a fact that you can't learn without that. So to me, it's really important. Now that the thing is that all data is imperfect, and so there's nothing that actually captures the whole gestalt of a child in school. So everything you measure is going to have its imperfections, and in particular, that's true of behavioral engagement. The trouble with behavioral engagement is that it's not really telling you what's going on inside the kid's head. But the upside of behavioral engagement data is that it's reliable. And so if you score it and I score it, or the teacher and I score it, we'll probably get the same kind of results. And so that's a helpful thing. And when you have a class that's really unsettled in terms of engagement in the classroom, the kids are pretty off task or disruptive, and the teacher's really struggling because it's pretty hard to have a class that's out of control, then behavioral data is really important.
So help us take us into the kind of use of video for understanding behavioral data, because there's multiple types of behavioral data that people can think about, kind of categorizing if they're going to go in and try and kind of bucket what they're seeing.
Yeah, I sort of see four big areas. One of them is time on task. One of them is the number of disruptions. One of them is the student responses to questions. And one of them is instructional time. How much time is wasted? How much time is committed? Honestly, I don't know that video is the best way to look at time on task. It's kind of hard to see what the kids are doing through video. You can try it, and it'll give you a sort of a rough picture. And if time on task is about 50%, it's going to be helpful. But I think to have a coach in the classroom who's really looking for that, it's probably more effective than video might surface the issue. But in terms of monitoring progress and growth, you probably need a coach there to gather it. Time, in my experience, time on task is a harder thing to get. But the other three, video is extremely important. So I like, for example, if you're looking at responses to questions, to have the camera just focus on the students and have the teacher ask a question, and then we see how do kids respond. And as the teacher over time develops a different set of questions and different ways of questioning, they can look at the student responses and see which different kids respond, how often do kids respond, what's the depth of the responses on the part, how accurate and correct are the responses. You don't always want correct responses. You want kids to take some risks, but if there's a significant number of incorrect responses, it's pretty telling. So that's really important. And in terms of disruptions, video is going to pull up pretty quickly how many kids are disruptive, how often they're disruptive. The trouble with a disruption is it interferes with teaching and learning. And every time you have a disruption, you have to get back on track. And it also messes with the culture of the class in that it's very clear that some kids are not doing the learning. And they're like, why? I have to kind of almost, if there's too many kids not doing the learning, then the norm is to not do the learning. And I have to be countercultural to be a learner in that classroom. And so paying attention to disruptions is really important. And then just in terms of instructional time, keeping track of how much of the lesson was productive and how much of it was wasted. And so sometimes the amount of wasted time is pretty large, and video will reveal that really clearly.
For those that haven't heard you talk about the power of why video as a data source is important, I mean, kind of take us into that challenge that sometimes people would say, which is, oh, well, I'm a teacher, I'm keeping track of how much disruptions are happening, or,
Right.
I'm monitoring what types of questions and responses happen in my classroom. Why is video still so important in that moment for those educators?
Well, I think the reality is it's not just teachers, it's any professional. We're not really clear on what it looks like when we do what we do. I know that's true of me. I mean, it's very true that in my meetings with our team or various things, my perception of what I do and what I really do are quite different. That's the power of Zoom, because Zoom can show you pretty quickly what you do. But people have perceptual errors like confirmation bias, and they have defense mechanisms like externalizing blame, minimizing the problem. And the defense mechanisms are helpful because if we saw life in its brutal, naked reality all the time, it would probably eat us up. And so it's a little too much to take it on all the time. But if you really want to learn, you need to look at where you are and see what you're doing. That's why athletes are the ones who are always watching themselves on video, because it reveals things they wouldn't ordinarily see. But the main thing is our perceptions of reality are significantly different than what's really happening. And maybe what's really happening is still a subjective thing, but nonetheless, video is going to give us another sort of lens on what's happening in the classroom. And it's when you see what's happening, you're going to say, oh, I want more of this, or I want less of that. But you're going to move away from talking at the theoretical level to actually doing something. Video moves you from talk to action is what happens.
I liked how you reframed that to, video as a tool, not just for teachers, it's a tool for all professionals and practitioners to get better at what they're doing. Jim, we have to take a short break, but this video conversation will continue. So if you're watching this and want to find out what we've talked about before or what we're going to talk about next, make sure to head to pltogether.org for the rest of this conversation, as well as many more. Jim, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.